then more innovators will enter and the reward rate will be driven down. If the reward looks poor, then innovators will stay away from the fund and the reward rate will recover. So the rate of reward on the Health Impact Fund is self-adjusting. It adjusts itself to the true cost of pharmaceutical innovation. This self-adjusting feature reassures innovators that they will never find the reward very, very low. That cannot happen. And it assures taxpayers that the reward will not be very high and that pharmaceutical companies will not get a huge windfall. Now, why do we need something like that? Why is this important? Why is that a really important reform? Well, it's important especially after the TRIPS agreement. You call that ADPICS, trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights. This was an important part of the WTO treaty that was concluded in the mid-1990s. According to the TRIPS agreement, all member states of the WTO have to introduce national patent legislation that guarantees pharmaceutical innovators patents on their products for at least 20 years. And this made a very big difference in many poor countries. India, for example, had weak patent protections before TRIPS. They had process patents, patenting a process, and these process patents could easily be circumvented by inventing a different way of making the same molecule. But now India had to conform to the TRIPS agreement as of January 2005, and so pharmaceutical innovators can get the same kind of product patents in India as they get in the rich countries. And so generic copies of new medicines are no longer available to the Indian patient population, nor to the African patient population into which Indian companies delivered many generic medicines. So patients have suffered huge disadvantages, poor patients, as a consequence of the TRIPS agreement. Now, relying only on TRIPS, only on these patents to incentivize innovation is a very bad idea from the point of view of social justice. The first reason is high prices. While the medicine is under patent, it costs a very large amount of money, and the majority of human beings simply cannot afford the medicine. Prices are very high because inequality in the world is very high. A monopolist will price a medicine in such a way as to maximize profit. And you maximize profit in a very high inequality economy by pricing for the rich, especially if you have a product that people desperately need. Rich people will pay a huge amount of money for a life-saving medicine, and because you lose few customers by raising the price, you will price it at a very high level. 15% of the world's population can afford it, and the rest will simply go without. You see here how income is distributed in the world. 49% of income is in the top 5% of the human population, and the bottom half of the human population has only 3% of income. So if you are an intelligent monopolist who has a life-saving product, you will price it for the rich. You can see it here graphically. What is the best way to maximize profit in this sort of income distribution? Well, the best way is to pick a very high price, maybe $100 or maybe even higher, because by raising the price, you gain more in terms of a higher markup than you lose by having fewer customers. So that's the first problem. The second problem is closely related. It is that pharmaceutical research is focused on the diseases that are common among rich people, and it ignores the diseases that are concentrated among poor people, such as dengue fever, schistosomiasis, tuberculosis, malaria, and so on. These are the so-called neglected diseases. And again, the reason is that you make more money with patented medicines from the rich customers, and so you care about their diseases and not the diseases of the poor. There's the famous 1090 gap, that only 10% of all research money in pharmaceuticals is spent on diseases that account for 90% of the global burden of disease. And conversely, 90% of all research money is concentrated on diseases that constitute only 10% of the global burden of disease. I'll just stop here. The basic idea is that the Health Impact Fund is a method that would greatly improve global health at relatively low cost. The present system is highly irrational, and it doesn't work well in the rich countries or in the poor countries. The United States is spending 16% of its gross national product on health and is not doing very well in terms of health. It is not ranking highly. I think it's number 37 in the world in terms of health. So rich countries are spending too much, and poor countries have very large problems. The Health Impact Fund, by bringing evaluation and assessment and measurement into the provision of healthcare, promises to make healthcare much more efficient. We get much more health value for the money that we spend on healthcare. If this idea works reasonably well, then we can use it in other areas as well, where we have the same problem, that because of monopolies, very good innovations are used too little, are underutilized. And two examples are agriculture, where patented seeds are often not used because they're so expensive. And so the world is using much more fertilizer, much more pesticide than would be necessary, which is a bad thing for all of us in terms of pollution, for example, and resource use. Another area would be green or clean technologies. We have wonderful green, clean technologies that are not used very much because they are so expensive. And they're expensive because the innovator has a monopoly on the technology and charges a high licensing fee. Again, that's very stupid because we all suffer the pollution, especially in Santiago, this pollution that comes from old technologies that are not green or clean enough. It would be much better if we allowed everybody to use the technology for free and then rewarded the innovator on the basis of emissions averted, on the basis of the environmental impact of the invention, because that impact is something that's socially valuable and benefits all of us. Good. Thank you very much.